Welcome to Paulstoolbox. Today I'm covering staining this door and this little opening right here, my windows next to the door. This door here had an old knocker in it, and I can't find one to replace it that has the holes in the same place. So I'm going to fill these holes up with bondo. Normally I would have to take and paint this door after that, but I'm going to use a stainable primer and cover right over it and stain it whatever color I want. I want more of a brown color. Now, say this door didn't have holes in it, I wanted to stain it a different color. Normally you would have to strip everything down, all the grooves and all, in order to get stained except in there again. But with this stainable primer, you don't have to do that. This is pretty cool stuff, and it's going to really make my door look sharp. All we have to do is rough it up a little bit so that primer will stick to it. We don't have to strip it all the way down. And if I have to, I can use a automotive primer right in these grooves because I don't want to sand in there. Then I can put that primer right on top of this and go with it. It's always a good idea to take all of your hardware and your screws and put them in one place. I take an old can and put them in there. This I can set right on top. Now all of this is in the same place. When I decide to go put this back in, I won't have to worry about losing screws and pieces and parts. Now all I have to do is lightly scuff this and of course fill these holes in right here with bondo. So it's only going to take a minute to do this. If you see any imperfections in the wood, sand them out. If there are gouges, we're going to fill that in because the primer is going to cover right over it. So you can see all we're doing is taking this clear coat off. It's cutting really well with the 120 grit sandpaper, and I don't have to get everything off. I just have to have everything a little bit rough, not real smooth. You don't want it slick. The thing about this primer is it sticks real well. The only problem is you don't want to put it over an oil-based clear or something like that, a varnish. You've got to either scuff that up or remove it before you put the primer on because this is a latex-based primer. It sticks real well, but you just have to have a little bit of a surface for it to grab on, and it's nothing to it. You can just scuff this up even with steel wool and come back over with this primer. It's going to stick. This is what I'm talking about with the clear. I'm not going to take my sander and try to get in there and mess this up. I'll just take steel wool, or you can use a deglosser on it. They make a deglosser called the liquid sandpaper. You can put that on here and that'll just degloss it. That's all you need to do. Once it's not shiny, the primer is going to stick to it well. All the flats are sanded. I took my steel wool and hit in the grooves and got all of this done, and then I just wipe it down with acetone. I like to use acetone because it doesn't leave a residue. It's really clean. Gray automotive primer is all I use. It's about $4 or $5 a can, and this will easily do the entire door if I wanted it to, but all I have to do is spray these grooves. Now I'm going to take these two holes. I'm just going to put a little aluminum foil in there so my bondo doesn't ooze all the way down to the other side. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. Like I said, you can bondo it because that stainable primer allows me to cover it up. So I'm going to mound it a little high so I can just sand it off. Because if I try to just fill it perfectly, I'll have to come back over it again. So I'll just go over it high, and that'll come off very easily. Right here I have a couple of little spots. Go ahead and hit those. Any imperfections you see on your door, you fill them now. And I'll let that bondo dry while I hit this side. Okay, I'm going to spray a little in these crevices, and when that dries, while that's drying, we'll bondo this side, and we'll be ready for the stainable primer. That's it. Now it's time to go ahead and put the stainable primer on. This stuff is really thick and it goes on real well. It covers well. This brush I just cleaned a little while ago, so it's got a little bit of water on it. All right, let's get it on. See how thick it is? You can see it brushes on really well. Okay, I'm gonna have to call it quits for the night. I got to a late start because I was painting other things on this house before I started this. Now, I mentioned this earlier, I always take my weather stripping off and replace it when I'm painting a door or a frame because it only costs $5 a length for this. So 2.5 lengths, you really have to buy 3 per door, but if you do 2 doors, you don't have to buy 6, you can buy 5 and you've got enough for it. So I'm going to take this off and pop it out. It slides out very easily. Then I'm going to replace it after this is all done. This one had some damage on it anyway, so it was kind of worn. After I get all of this cleaned up and painted and my door painted, then I'll put new weather stripping on it. But this weather stripping being on here, when I put the door back on, if the door is not completely dry, it's going to stick to that weather stripping. You know how that is? When you close your door the next morning, you open it up and your paint stuck to the weather stripping comes off your door. We don't want that to happen. So that's why I change this whenever I'm doing that. Also, you can just go down here and put a good coat of paint on it without having to worry about getting it on the weather stripping. All right. We will continue this tomorrow and we will knock it out. And this is the way I like to do it. I'll do my inside raised panels, then I'll come back over and get the long pieces after. So I'm going to take my time on each one and brush them out really well. That way I don't have crooked brush strokes. I want them straight. Come across it straight back and forth and that'll give you a nice grain look. You don't want to puddle it in those corners. You want to get all of that out. Once it's covered, your first coat covers just about everything. You're just coming back over with your second coat to get your brush strokes in. With this primer, you should let it sit for 1 hour in between coats. After that, I have my final coat down here right now, and I'm going to wait 4 hours before I stain it. I'm using a Minwax Cherry. The number is 235. I'll start from one end and I'll work my way to the other. The stain goes on real smooth. You see how it just absorbs it right away? I go with the grain on everything. If I'm going up and down on these, that's the way I'm going to go. The grain runs this way, I'm not going to go across it. Here, it goes across, so I'm going to follow that same grain pattern. I had my coat on here of stain, and I really want to go back with something a little bit darker than this. So I want to take this and put a little brown in it, and I'm going to use rust-oleum dark walnut to tint this down a little bit. I think that's going to give it a nice brown look. I didn't want to go too dark and take the dark walnut right off the bat, because if I put that on here without this cherry stain underneath it, it would be a little bit darker than I want. Yeah, this is the brown that I want. I can go a little lighter if I want to rub it in deep. Leave a couple of streaks if I want, but this is really the color that I'm looking for. This door is ready to put my clear coat on here, but before I start that, I want to show you something. I take a small brush. This is a little artist brush, and I'll dip it in my stain and catch some of the little tiny spots that I may have missed. I just scan over everything, and if I have a little spot where the rag didn't cover, I'll just touch it up with this. And you can get in the corners real easily with this. Then you can wipe it, let it dry, and then later on come back over with your clear. And that's what we're going to do right now. With your clear coat, you can use an exterior polyurethane, a varnish, or anything like that. Marine varnish is really nice because it protects it outdoors real well. Thing is, you have to wait for those things to dry. Marine varnish, you'll have to put a coat on here, lightly sand it, and come back the next day and do another coat. Catch all my raised panels. Once I cover it all the way, I'll do just like my stain and everything else, I go with the grain. So at first I might just blob it in all over, but you have to go with the grain once you have it covered. I'm finished my coat of clear, my first coat for the exterior. On the interior, I want to use a matte finish, so I'm going to use a pre-catalyzed lacquer. This is the same lacquer that I use on my cabinets, and this is made by Mohawk. It's an excellent product. It dries real even and it dries real fast. So I'm going to spray this, and then I'll be able to just flip it back over in about 15 minutes and go ahead and hit my outside, another coat on there. An hour later, this store will be ready to put back up. I use even spray strokes with it. I keep the can a few inches away. About 5 to 6 inches away is what I like to do, and I'll just go evenly. I'll run it off the end and come back. You see it get a little glossy, that's fine. That means you covered it well, and it's going to dry to a nice matte finish. Pre-catalyzed lacquer by Mohawk. This is fantastic stuff. This is a matte finish. Don't forget that. That gives a nice even tone. And this is great stuff you can purchase at your finer stores, your paint supply houses. Now I'm going to let it sit for a few minutes, flip it over, and we'll brush on a second coat for the outside. Well, we have another project out the way, and this really came out nice. This stainable primer is some awesome stuff. I was able to bondo this door, which had holes in it, and instead of having to go back with paint, I was still able to stain it, and it's really a nice looking stain. If I wanted to make this stained, I could easily prime this and stain this too. Now, when I touched on the doors, remember, I take this weather stripping off. It just pops right off. And in this case, I put new weather stripping because it was old. But if your weather stripping is good, if I decide to paint this next year and the weather stripping is still good, I'll pop it off, paint it, and put it back on. That's all there is to it. That gives you a nice clean line all the way around. If you want to get this stainable primer for yourself, you can check out staincraft.com or paulstoolbox.com, and you can get it at both those sites. Well, the link will be down in the bottom. I'm going to put it in the description box so you can check that out anytime. I'll talk to you later, and don't forget to subscribe.